5 to 6 weeks after these days, the legendary Satanic revels are celebrated. The Black Mass. No other single device has been associated with Satanism as much as the Black Mass. To say that the most blasphemous of all religious ceremonies is nothing more than a literary invention is certainly a statement which needs qualifying, but nothing could be truer. The popular concept of the Black Mass is thus: a defrocked priest stands before an altar, consisting of a nude woman, her legs spread eagled and vagina thrust open, each of her outstretched fists grasping a black candle made from the fat of unbaptized babies, and the chalice containing the urine of a prostitute or blood reposing on her belly. An inverted cross hangs above the altar, and triangular hosts of earth-laden bread or black-stained turnip are methodically blessed as the priest dutifully slips them in and out of the altar lady's labia. Then, we are told, an invocation to Satan and various demons is followed by an array of prayers and psalms chanted backwards or interspersed with obscenities, all performed within the confines of a protective pentagram drawn on the flute. If the devil appears, he is invariably in the form of a rather eager man wearing the head of a black goat upon his shoulders. Then follows a potpourri of flagellation, prayer book burning, cunnilingus, fellatio, and general hindquarters kissing, all done to a background of ribald recitations from the Holy Bible, and audible expectorations on the cross. If a baby can be slaughtered during the ritual, so much the better, for as everyone knows, this is the favorite sport of Satanists. If this sounds repugnant, then the success of the reports of the Black Mass, in keeping the devout in church, is easy to understand. No decent person could fail to side with the inquisitors when told of these blasphemies. The propagandists of the church did their job well, informing the public at one time or another of the heresies and heinous acts of the pagans, Cathars, Bogomils, Templars, and others who, because of their dualistic philosophies and sometimes satanic logic, had to be eradicated. The stories of unbaptized babies being stolen by Satanists for use in the Mass were not only effective propaganda measures, but also provided a constant source of revenue for the Church, in the form of baptism fees. No Christian mother would, upon hearing of these diabolical kidnappings, refrain from getting her child properly baptized, post haste. Another facet of man's nature was apparent in the fact that the writer or artist with viewed thoughts could exercise his most obscene predilections in the portrayal of the activities of heretics. The censor views all pornography so that he will know what to warn others of is the modern equivalent of the medieval chronicler of the obscene deeds of Satanists and, of course, their modern journalistic counterparts. It is believed that the most complete library of pornography in the world is owned by the Vatican. The kissing of the devils behind during the traditional Black Mass is easily recognized as the forerunner of the modern term used to describe one who will, through appealing to another's ego, gain materially from him. As all satanic ceremonies were performed toward very real or material goals, the osculatum infimorcus of shame was considered a symbolic requisite towards earthly, rather than spiritual, success. The usual assumption is that the satanic ceremony or service is always called the Black Mass. 8. Black Mass is not the magical ceremony practiced by Satanists. The Satanist would only employ the use of a black mass as a form of psychodrama. Furthermore, the black mass does not necessarily imply that the performers of such are Satanists. The black mass is essentially a parody of the religious service of the Roman Catholic Church, but can be loosely applied to a satire on any religious ceremony. To the Satanist, the black mass, in its blaspheming of orthodox rites, is nothing more than a redundancy. The services of all established religions are actually parodies of old rituals performed by the worshippers of the earth and the flesh, in attempts to desexualize and dehumanize the pagan beliefs. Later men of spiritual faith whitewash the honest meanings behind the rituals into the bland euphemisms now considered to be the true mass. Even if the Satanist were to spend each night performing a black mass, he would no more be performing a travesty than the devout churchgoer who unwillingly attends his own black mass. His spoofs on the honest and emotionally sound rites of pagan antiquity. Any ceremony considered a black mass must effectively shock and outrage, as this seems to be the measure of its success. In the Middle Ages, blaspheming the Holy Church was shocking. Now, however, the Church does not present the awesome image it did during the Inquisition. The traditional black mass is no longer the outrageous spectacle to the dilettante or renegade priest that it once was. If a Satanist wishes to create a ritual to blaspheme an accepted institution for the purpose of psychodrama, he is careful to choose one that is not invoked to parody. Thus, he is truly stepping on a sacred cow. The black mass, today, would consist of the blaspheming of such sacred topics as Eastern mysticism, psychiatry, the psychedelic movement, ultraliberalism, etc. Patriotism would be championed, drugs and their gurus would be defiled, a cultural militants would be deified, and the decadence of ecclesiastical theologies might even be given a satanic boost. The satanic magus has always been the catalyst for the dichotomy necessary in molding popular beliefs, and in this case the ceremony in the nature of a black mass may serve a far-reaching magical purpose. In the year 1666, some rather interesting events occurred in France. With the death of François Mansart, the architect of the trapezoid, whose geometrics were to become the prototype of the haunted house, the Palace of Versailles was being constructed, in accordance with his plans. The last of the glamorous priestesses of Satan, Jean-Marie Bouvier, Madame Deviant, was to be overshadowed by a shrewd, opportunist, and callous businesswoman named Catherine Deshays, otherwise known as La Deviation. Here was an erstwhile politician who, while dabbling in abortions and purveying the most efficient poisons to ladies desirous of eliminating unwanted husbands or lovers, found in the lurid accounts of the Messoir proverbial brainstorm. It is safe to say that 1666 was the year of the first commercial black mass in the region south of Saint Denis, which is now called Labyrinth. A great walled house was purchased by La Deviation and fitted with dispensaries, cells, laboratories, and the chapel. Soon it became de rigueur for royalty and lesser dilettantes to attend and participate in the very type of service mentioned earlier in this chapter. The organized fraud perpetrated in these ceremonies has become indelibly marked in history as the true Black Mass. When La Deviation was arrested on March 13, 1679 in the Church of Our Blessed Lady of Good Tidings, incidentally, the die had already been cast. The degraded activities of deviation had stifled the majesty of Satanism for many years to come. The Satanism for fun and games fad next appeared in England in the middle 18th century in the form of Sir Francis Dashwood's Order of the Midmorn and Franciscans, popularly called the Hellfire Club. While eliminating the blood, gore, and baby fat candles of the previous century's masses, Sir Francis managed to conduct rituals replete with good dirty fun, and certainly provided a colorful and harmless form of psychodrama for many of the leading lights of the period. An interesting sideline of Sir Francis, which lends a clue to the climate of the Hellfire Club, was a group called the Dilettanti Club, of which he was the founder. It was the 19th century that brought the whitewashing to Satanism, in the feeble attempts of white magicians trying to perform black magic. This was a very paradoxical period for Satanism, with writers such as Baudelaire and Huysmans who, despite their apparent obsession with evil, seemed nice enough fellows. The devil developed his Luciferian personality for the public to see, and gradually evolved into a sort of drawing room gentleman. This was the era of experts on the black arts, such as Eliphas Levi and countless trance mediums who, with their carefully bound spirits and demons, have also succeeded in binding the minds of many who call themselves parapsychologists to this day. As far as Satanism is concerned, the closest outward signs of this were the neo-pagan rites conducted by MacGregor Maker's Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and Aleister Crowley's later Order of the Silver Star 8. Argentinum Astrum and Order of Oriental Templars O.T.O. which paranoidally denied any association with Satanism, despite Crowley's self-imposed image of the beast of Revelation. Aside from some rather charming poetry and a smattering of magical bric-a-brac, when not climbing mountains, Crowley spent most of his time as a poser par excellence and worked overtime to be wicked. Like his contemporary, Red Dot Man Tag Summers, Crowley obviously spent a large part of his life with his tongue jammed firmly into his cheek, but his followers, today, are somehow able to read esoteric meaning into his every word. Perennially concurrent with these societies were the sex clubs using Satanism as a rationale that persists today, for which tabloid newspaper writers may give thanks if it appears that the Black Mass developed from a literary invention of the Church to a depraved commercial actuality, to a psychodrama for dilettantes and iconoclasts, to an ace in the hole for popular media. Then where does it fit into the true nature of Satanism, and who was practicing satanic magic in those years beyond 1666? The answer to this riddle lies in another. Is the person generally considered to be a Satanist really practicing Satanism in its true sense, or rather from the point of view taken by the opinion makers of heavenly persuasion? It has often been said, and rightly so, that all of the books about the devil have been written by the agents of God. It is, therefore, quite easy to understand how a certain breed of devil worshippers was created through the inventions of theologians. This erstwhile evil character is not necessarily practicing true Satanism, nor is he a living embodiment of the element of untrammeled pride or majesty of self which gave the post-pagan world the churchman's definition of evil. he is instead the byproduct of later and more elaborate propaganda. The pseudo-Satanist has always managed to appear throughout modern history with his black masses of varying degrees of blasphemy, but the real Satanist is not quite so easily recognized. As such, it would be an oversimplification to say that every successful man and woman on earth is, without knowing it, a practicing Satanist, but the thirst for earthly success and its ensuing realization are certainly grounds for St. Peter turning thumbs down. If the rich man's entry into heaven seems as difficult as the camel's attempt to go through the eye of a needle, if the love of money is the root of all evil, then we must at least assume the post-powerful men on earth to be the most satanic. This applies to financiers, industrialists, popes, poets, dictators, and all assorted opinion makers and field marshals of the world's activities. Occasionally, through leakages, one of the enigmatic men or women of earth will be found to have dabbled in the black arts. These, of course, are brought to light as in the mystery. Men of history, names like Rasputin, Zaharov, Cagliostro, Rosenberg, and their ilk are links, clues, so to speak, of the true legacy of Satan. A legacy which transcends ethnic, racial, and economic differences and temporal ideologies as well. The Satanist has always ruled the earth, and always will, by whatever name he is called. One thing stands sure: the standards, philosophy, and practices set forth on these pages are those employed by the most self-realized and powerful humans on earth. In the secret thoughts of each man and woman, still motivated by sound and unclouded minds, resides the potential of Satanist, as always has been. The sign of the horns shall appear to many now, rather than the few, and the magician will stand forth that he may be recognized. Earth. The Book of Belial. The mastery of the earth. The greatest appeal of magic is not in its application, but in its esoteric meanderings. The element of mystery which so heavily enshrouds the practice of the black arts has been fostered, deliberately or out of ignorance, by those who often claim the highest expertise in such matters. If the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, then established occultists would do well as maze makers. The basic principles of ceremonial magic have been relegated for so long to infinitely classified bits of scholastic mysticism that the would-be wizard becomes the victim of the very art of misdirection which he himself should be employing. An analogy may be drawn of the student of applied psychology who, though knowing all of the answers, cannot make friends. What good is a study of falsehoods, unless everyone believes in falsehoods? Many, of course, do believe in falsehoods, but still act according to natural law. It is upon this premise that Satanic magic is based. This is a primer, the basic text on materialistic magic. It is a Satanic masterpiece reader. Belial means without a master and symbolizes true independence, self-sufficiency, and personal accomplishment. Belial represents the earth element, and herein will be found magic with both feet on the ground. Real, hardcore, magical procedure, not mystical platitudes, devoid of objective reason. Probe no longer. Here is bedrock. The theory and practice of Satanic magic. Definition and purpose. The definition of magic, as used in this book, is to change in situations or events in accordance with one's will, which would, using normally accepted methods, be unchangeable. This admittedly leaves a large area for personal interpretation. It will be said by some that these instructions and procedures are nothing more than applied psychology, or scientific fact, called by magical terminology, until they arrive at a passage in the text that is based on no known scientific finding. It is for this reason that no attempt has been made to limit the explanations set forth to a set nomenclature. Magic is never totally scientifically explainable, but science has always been, at one time or another, considered magic. There is no difference between white and black magic, except in the smug hypocrisy, guilt-ridden righteousness, and self-deceit of the white magician himself. In the classical religious tradition, white magic is performed for altruistic, benevolent, and good purposes, while black magic is used for self-aggrandizement, personal power, and evil purposes. No one on earth ever pursued occult studies, metaphysics, yoga, or any other white light concept without ego gratification and personal power as a goal. It just so happens that some people enjoy wearing hair shirts, and others prefer velvet or silk. What is pleasure to one is pain to another, and the same applies to good and evil. Every practitioner of witchcraft is convinced that he or she is doing the right thing. Magic falls into two categories: ritual or ceremonial, and non-ritual or manipulative. Ritual magic consists of the performance of a formal ceremony, taking place, at least in part, within the confines of an area set aside for such purposes and at a specific time. Its main function is to isolate the otherwise dissipated adrenal and other emotionally induced energy, and convert it into a dynamically transmittable force. It is purely an emotional, rather than intellectual, fact. Any and all intellectual activity must take place before the ceremony, not during it. This type of magic is sometimes known as greater magic. Non-ritual or manipulative magic, sometimes called lesser magic, consists of the wild and guile obtained through various devices and contrived situations, which when utilized, can create change in accordance with one's will. In olden times this would be called fascination, glamour, or the evil eye. Most of the victims of the witch trials were not witches. Often the victims were eccentric old women who were either senile or did not conform to society. Others were exceptionally attractive women who turned the heads of the men in power and were not responsive to their advances. The real witches were rarely executed or even brought to trial, as they were proficient in the art of enchantment and could charm the men and save their own lives. Most of the real witches were sleeping with the inquisitors. This is the origin of the word glamour. The antiquated meaning of glamour is witchcraft. The most important asset to the modern witch is her ability to be alluring, or to utilize glamour. The word fascination has a similarly occult origin. Fascination was the term applied to the evil eye, to fix a person's gaze. In other words, fascinate was to curse them with the evil eye. Therefore, if a woman had the ability to fascinate men, she was regarded as a witch. Had the ability to fascinate men, she was regarded as a witch. learning to effectively utilize the command to look is an integral part of a witch's or warlock's training. To manipulate a person, you must first be able to attract and hold his attention. The three methods by which the command to look can be accomplished are the utilization of sex, sentiment, or wonder. For any combination of these, a witch must, honestly, decide into which category she most naturally falls. The first category, that of sex, is self-evident. If a woman is attractive or sexually appealing, she should do everything in her power to make herself as enticing as possible, thereby using sex as her most powerful tool. Once she has gained the man's attention by using her sex appeal, she is free to manipulate him to her will. The second category is sentiment. Usually older women fit into this category. This would include the kooky lady type witch, who might live in a little cottage and be thought of by people as being a bit eccentric. Children are usually enchanted by the fantasy that this type of witch can provide for them, and young adults seek her out for her sage-like advice. Through their innocence, children can recognize her magical power. By conforming to an image of the sweet little old lady next door, she can employ the art of misdirection to accomplish her goals. The third category is the wonder theme. This category would apply to the woman who is strange or awesome in her appearance. By making her strange appearance work for her, she can manipulate people simply because they are fearful of the consequences should they not do as she asks. Many women fit into more than one of these categories. For example, the young girl who has an appearance of freshness and innocence, but at the same time is very sexy, combines sex appeal with sinister overtones, uses sex and wonder. After evaluating her assets, each witch must decide into which category or combination of categories she fits, and then utilize these assets in their proper form. To be a successful warlock, a man must similarly fit himself into the proper category. The handsome or sexually appealing man would naturally fit into the first category, sex. The second, or sentiment category, would apply to the older man who is perhaps an elf in or forest wizard appearance. The sweet old grandpa, often a dirty old man, would also be in the sentiment category. The third type would be the man who presents a sinister or diabolic appearance. Each of these men would apply his particular brand of the command to look in much the same way as the women previously described. Visual image utilized for emotional reaction is certainly the most important device incorporated in the practice of lesser magic. Anyone who is foolish enough to say looks don't mean a thing is indeed deluded. Good looks are unnecessary, but looks certainly are needed. Odor is another important manipulative factor in lesser magic. Remember, animals fear and distrust anyone or anything that doesn't smell, and even though we may, as human animals, deny many of the judgments based on this sense consciously, we still are motivated by our sense of smell just as surely as any all-force animal. If you are a man and wish to enchant a woman, allow the natural secretions of your body to pervade the atmosphere immediately around you, and work in animalistic contrast to the vestments of social politeness that you wear upon your back. If you, as a woman, wish to bewitch a man, Do not fear that you might offend simply because the oils and fragrances of your flesh have not been scrubbed away, for that place between your thighs is not dry and sterile. These natural odors are the sexual stimulants which nature, in her magical wisdom, has provided. The sentiment stimulants are those odors that will appeal to pleasant memories and nostalgia. The enchanting of a man, through his stomach, is first established by the smell of cooking. 8. Sentiment type of which will find this one of the most useful of all charms. It is not so facetious to dwell upon the technique of the man who wished to charm the young lady who had been displaced from her home of childhood joys, which happened to be a fishing village. Wise to the ways of lesser magic, he neatly tucked the mackerel into his trousers pocket, and reaped the rewards that great fondness may often bring. The 3 types of Satanic ritual. There are 3 types of ceremony incorporated in the practice of Satanic magic. Each of these correspond to a basic human emotion. The first of these we shall call a sex ritual. The sex ritual is what is commonly known as a love charm or spell. The purpose in performing such a ritual is to create desire on the part of the person whom you desire, or to summon a sex partner to fulfill your desires. If you have no specific person or type of person in mind strong enough to cause direct sexual feeling culminating in orgasm, you will not succeed in performing a successful working. The reason for this is that, even if the ritual was successful by accident, what good would it serve if you could not take advantage of your eventual opportunity because of lack of stimulation or desire? It is easy to confuse enchantment for your ulterior motives with spell casting to satisfy your sexual desires. Enchantment for self-aggrandizement, when accompanied by ceremonial magic, falls into the category of either the compassion or the destruction ritual, or possibly both. If you want or need something so badly you are sad or feel much anguish without it, without causing hurt on another's part, then this would incorporate the compassion ritual to increase your power. If you wish to enchant or entrap the deserving victim for your own purposes, you would employ a destruction ritual. These formulas are to be adhered to, as applying the wrong type of ritual towards a desired result can lead to trouble of a complicated nature. A good example of this is the girl who finds herself plagued by a relentless suitor. If she has done little to encourage him, then she should recognize him for the psychic vampire he is, and let him play his masochistic role. If, however, she has enchanted him frivolously, giving him every encouragement, and then finds herself the steady object of sexual desire, much to her dismay, she has no one to blame but herself. Such exercises are only ego boosts, born of an indoctrination of ego denial which makes these little bewitchments necessary. The Satanist has enough ego strength to use enchantments for her own sexual gratification, or to gain power or success of a specific nature. The second type of ritual is of a compassionate nature. The compassion, or sentiment, ritual is performed for the purpose of helping others, or helping oneself. Health, domestic happiness, business activities, material success, and scholastic prowess are but a few of the situations covered in a compassion ritual. It might be said that this form of ceremony could fall into the realm of genuine charity, bearing in mind that charity begins at home. The third motivating force is that of destruction. This is a ceremony used for anger, annoyance, disdain, contempt, or just plain hate. It is known as a hex, curse, or destroying agent. One of the greatest of all fallacies about the practice of ritual magic is the notion that one must believe in the powers of magic before one can be harmed or destroyed by them. Nothing could be farther from the truth, as the most receptive victims of curses have always been the greatest scoffers. The reason is frighteningly simple. The uncivilized tribesman is the first to run to his nearest witch doctor or shaman when he feels a curse has been placed upon him by an enemy. The threat and presence of harm is with him consciously, and belief in the power of the curse is so strong that he will take every precaution against it. Thus, through the application of sympathetic magic, he will counteract any harm that might come his way. This man is watching his step and not taking any chances. On the other hand, the enlightened man, who doesn't place any stock in such superstition, relegates his instinctive fear of the curse to his unconscious, thereby nourishing it into a phenomenally destructive force that will multiply with each succeeding misfortune. Of course, every time a new setback occurs, the non-believer will automatically deny any connection with the curse, especially to himself. The emphatic conscious denial of the potential of the curse is the very ingredient that will create its success, through setting up of accident-prone situations. In many instances, the victim will deny any magical significance to his fate, even unto his dying gasp, although the magician is perfectly satisfied, so long as his desired results occur. It must be remembered that it matters not whether anyone attaches any significance to your working, so long as the results of the working are in accordance with your will. The superlogician will always explain the connection of the magical ritual to the end result as coincidence. Whether magic is performed for constructive or destructive purposes, the success of the operation is dependent on the receptivity of the person who is to receive the blessing or curse. As the case may be, in the case of a sex or compassion ritual, it helps if the recipient has faith and believes in magic, but the victim of a hex or curse is much more prone to destruction if he does not believe in it. So long as man knows the meaning of fear, he will need the ways and means to defend himself against his fears. No one knows everything, and as long as there is wonder, there will always be an apprehension of the unknown, where there are potentially dangerous forces. It is this natural fear of the unknown, the first cousin to the fascination towards the unknown, that impels the man of logic towards his very explanations. Obviously, the man of science is motivated to discovery by his very sense of wonder. And yet, how sad that this man who calls himself logical is often the last to recognize the essence of ritual magic. If religious faith can make bleeding wounds appear on the body in approximation to the wounds supposedly inflicted on Christ, it is called stigma. These wounds appear as a result of compassion driven to an emotionally violent extreme. Why, then, should there be any doubt as to the destructive extremes of fear and terror? The so-called demons have the power to destroy in a flesh-rending manner, theoretically, as much as a handful of nails, long rusted away. can create blood-dripping ecstasy in a person convinced he is hooked upon the cross of Calvary. 5 to 6 weeks after these days, the legendary Satanic revels are celebrated. The Black Mass. No other single device has been associated with Satanism as much as the Black Mass. To say that the most blasphemous of all religious ceremonies is nothing more than a literary invention is certainly a statement which needs qualifying, but nothing could be truer. The popular concept of the Black Mass is thus: a defrocked priest stands before an altar, consisting of a nude woman, her legs spread eagled and vagina thrust open, each of her outstretched fists grasping a black candle made from the fat of unbaptized babies, and the chalice containing the urine of a prostitute or blood reposing on her belly. An inverted cross hangs above the altar, and triangular hosts of earth-laden bread or black-stained turnip.